Okay, so this week's parsha is Parshas Bahaloscha, and it begins on. I'll be there in a second. Thank you, Ellen. On page 775, and thank you. Okay, so the parsha begins. Hashem spoke to Moshe, saying, "Speak to Aaron and say to him, when you kindle the lamps towards the face of the menorah, shall the seven lamps cast light?" There's a mitzvah of lighting the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash, or in the Mishkan of the tabernacle, in the Beis Hamikdash, the temple. And Aaron did so. Towards the face of the menorah, he kindled its lamps as Hashem had commanded Moshe. This is the workmanship of the menorah, hammered out gold from its base to its flowers. It is hammered out according to the vision that Hashem showed Moshe. So did he make the menorah. Okay, there's a number of questions here. One of them is, what is this doing here, especially what is the workmanship doing here? That we can understand maybe that here's where he was. We had just finished the end of last week's parsha, what they call Chanukas HaMizbeach, the inauguration offerings on the Mizbeach, on the altar, and now he's getting the mitzvah of how to light the menorah. But why does it give also the construction of the menorah in verse 4? This is the workmanship of the menorah, hammered out gold. The construction of the menorah was already commanded way back in Parshas Truma with all the other vessels of the Mishkan of the tabernacle. So what's this doing here? So the Rav Shimon Schwab answers that it's the key here is that it says, as according to the vision that Hashem had showed Moshe, so did he make the menorah. And so what's this vision that Hashem showed Moshe? That the Medrash says that Moshe was couldn't understand the directions as to how to make the menorah, and Hashem showed him a vision of the menorah so he could understand. So Rav Shimon Schwab says, what's this vision of the menorah? We find another vision of the menorah in the Haftorah. And that is on page the Haftorah for Baloscha, that's on page 1182. It's page 1182. Oh, whatever. Okay, so page 1182. It starts on page 1182, but the part that I want to deal with is page 1183. It's chapter 4, and it states, the angel who spoke with me, this is the prophet Zechariah speaking, the angel who spoke with me returned and woke me as a man is awakened from his sleep. He said to me, what did you see? I said, I see and behold, there is a menorah made entirely of gold with its bowl on its top, and its 7 lamps are upon it. And there are 7 tubes to each of the lamps that are on its top, and 2 olive trees are near it, one to the right of the bowl and one to its left. I spoke up and said to the angel that was speaking to me, what are these, my Lord? The angel who was speaking to me spoke up and said to me, do you not know what they are? I said, no, my Lord. And on page 1184, he spoke up and said to me, saying, this is the word of Hashem to Zerubbabel, saying, not through armies, not through might, but through my spirit, says Hashem, master of legions. Who are you, O great mountains? Before Zerubbabel, you shall become a plain. You shall bring forth the main stone to shouts of beauty, beauty to it. Okay, so we have this illustration that Hashem takes care of all of our needs, and it's not that the salvation is not going to be through our might or through our armies. It's going to be through Hashem's spirit, and that's represented by the menorah that's self-perpetuating, that it has olive trees on the side with tubes going to it, and it fills itself. But this is another vision of the menorah we find, and so Shimon Schwab says it would be sensible to understand that this vision of a menorah, it's not just something that Hashem made appear to them. What they're seeing is a spiritual menorah. That's that the physical menorah is kind of a physical embodiment of that, and that is the menorah of the heavenly Mishkan, of the heavenly temple. And that's the spiritual embodiment of the physical menorah, the physical temple that we have in this world, or had in this world. And if you look at this vision that Zechariah saw and that Moshe saw as well, it says that the 7 lamps are upon it, that it was lit. So and that's what the Torah is telling us, is that that's according to the vision that Hashem showed Moshe, that when Hashem showed Moshe the heavenly menorah, Moshe saw that the menorah was lit, and that's a part of the construction. That's an intrinsic part of the construction. It's not, the menorah wasn't just a vessel that he was to act on and light it. A part of the construction of the menorah, an intrinsic part of the menorah, was being lit. And therefore, when we finally have the mitzvah to light it and instructions how to light it, that Aaron should be lighting it. So we include also how it's built, because this is a part of the building. Okay, I thought that was a nice part. Another thing they discuss here is the juxtaposition of the end of the last week's parsha and the beginning of this week's parsha. Last week's parsha ends with the offerings of the Nesiim, with the offering the leader of each tribe brought an offering, an identical offering, to inaugurate the Mizbeach, to inaugurate the altar. Now we have this mitzvah of the menorah to Aaron, and our sages say that the reason for that juxtaposition is that when Aaron saw all the Nesiim, all the leaders of the tribes were inspired to bring their offerings, and they were identical offerings. If you look through there, the tribe of Levi did not bring. And that caused Aaron pain. He felt, as one of the great leaders of the tribe of Levi, why was it that he wasn't inspired to bring an offering for the Chanukas HaMizbeach, for the inauguration of the Mizbeach? And he felt perhaps he wasn't worthy. And to that, Hashem answered him that what you have is greater than what they have, because they're bringing these gifts and these offerings. You're going to light the menorah. So the commentaries ask, they're bothered that what kind of answer is that? How does that answer his question? First of all, when all the other tribes brought their offerings, they brought, let's say, the animal, but who was the one, or the mincha, they brought the flour, whatever it was, and the vessel. Who was it who actually who actually did the ritual of the offering? That was Aaron, that was the Kohanim. So he was involved in each of the offerings, even if he wasn't the one who actually donated it, but he was involved in the bringing of the offering. So what is this thing that Hashem's telling him, you're going to do the menorah? What extra does that have? What does that add, that like bringing all the offerings wasn't enough for him, but you're going to light the menorah, and now I feel better. So the Ramban, I think, brings the medrash that this is actually the menorah that's mentioned here is a hint to the actual, not just the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash, but it's a hint to the Hanukkah menorah. And a hint to the Maccabees, who were Kohanim. They were descendants of Aaron. And what Hashem was telling him is that, yes, they're bringing an inauguration for the Mizbeach, an inauguration for the altar, which is a momentous event, that now we have a place to focus our service of Hashem in the temple, in the tabernacle, the temple, but that's not going to last forever. That this tabernacle was around for the 40 years that they were in the desert. They had the tabernacle in Gilgal when they came into the land of Israel. There was a tabernacle in Shiloh for hundreds of years, 300 some odd years, I think. Yeah, 300, or I get confused, 300s or 400s. I think it was 300s of years, like 360 years or so. And don't quote me on those numbers. And so we had the tabernacle in Shiloh, and we had the Beis HaMikdash. We had the temples for some 800 years or so. And that was the time period that we had the menorah. So it was like we had the menorah for some 1,100, 1,200 years. But that's very nice. But the menorah of Hanukkah we have for eternity. So he's saying it's a beautiful thing that they did, that we had the temple, and we had the Mizbeach, we had the altar where we brought offerings, but that was something that was temporary. It's something that we didn't have forever. But the menorah of Hanukkah, which was initiated and was triggered by the war fought by the Maccabees and the descendants of Aaron for the honor and glory of Hashem, so that was something that we carry with us throughout our exile and through all the destiny of the Jewish people. And that's something that he says, Aaron, you have that they don't have. Okay, so next is the consecration of the Levim. He gives how they sanctified the Levim in verse 5 on page 775. Hashem spoke to Moshe, saying, take the Levites from among the children of Israel and purify them. And so shall you do to them to purify them, sprinkle upon them the water of purification. That's from the red heifer, and let them pass a razor over their entire flesh. And that means they shave all their whole bodies, all the hair off their bodies, and let them immerse their garments, and they shall become pure. So they had to immerse their garments in the mikvah, and they shall take a young bull as a meal offering, fine flour mixed with oil, and a second young bull shall you take as a sin offering. You shall bring the Levites before the tent of meeting. You shall gather together an entire assembly of the children of Israel. You shall bring the Levites before Hashem. The children of Israel shall lean their hands upon the Levites, and Aaron shall wave the Levites as a wave service before Hashem from the children of Israel, and they shall remain to perform the service of Hashem. So Aaron had to wave the Leviim, pick them up, and wave them, to the north, to the east, west, north, south, and in every direction. And the Medrash says that this was a tremendous miracle that Aaron was able to lift every Levi. We said there were thousands of them. And Aaron was able to lift all the Leviim in this day. And yes, 24,000. And he was able to list 20, here, Baker Rabbah says 22,000 Leviim in a single day, that it was tremendous strength that Moshe and Aaron had. And it's besides its muscle, not necessarily muscle strength, but strength of character that Hashem told them to do it. And they went and did it and didn't question, how could I do that? Where will, what human being has an endurance? Yes, like a lulav. Mm-hmm. And when they followed the will of Hashem, and without question, Hashem gave them the strength to continue. Okay. So and then we got the rules for the Leviim when they were to do the service in verse 23 on page 777. Hashem spoke to Moshe, saying that this shall apply to the Levites from 25 years of age and up. He shall join the legion of the service of the tent of meeting. From 50 years of age, he shall withdraw from the legion of work and no longer work, that they retire at 50. And earlier, we said they were counted from the age of 30 in Bamidbar. And our sages say that it was actually that there was at the age of 25, they entered into the service as like an apprentice, and that they learned the service while performing some things and observing. And at 30 years of age, that's when they actually entered into the service, active service in the tabernacle. Okay. So then on page 779, chapter 9, we have the Pesach offering in the wilderness. So Hashem spoke to Moshe in the wilderness of Sinai in the second year from their exodus from the land of Egypt in the first month, saying, the children of Israel shall make the Pesach offering in its appointed time. On the 14th day of this month in the afternoon shall you make it in its appointed time, according to all its decrees and laws shall you make it. So the Ramban says that we need this mitzvah here, that because, what's that? Yes, 22,000, yes. So, right, okay, good. So the Ramban comments that the reason why we have this mitzvah again, even though we had it in Parshas Bo earlier in Shemos, was that there we had the mitzvah, he says, to bring the Pesach offering in Egypt, the original Pesach night, and the mitzvah in the land of Israel. But we didn't see, once we get to the land of Israel, but we hear they're being told, even in the desert, they had the mitzvah, even before we got to the land of Israel, they have the mitzvah to bring the Pesach offering. Okay. So where are we? So then they did it. And in verse 6, there were men who had been contaminated by a human corpse and could not make the Pesach offering on that day. So who are these people? So there's a number of opinions in the Gemara. Some say that they were the ones who carried Yosef's coffin. So Yosef had requested that that they would bring his body when they left Egypt because he was buried in Egypt. So he made them swear that they would bring his body out of Egypt to the land of Israel when they return. Or some say it was Nadav and Avihu. It was Mishal and Elzaphan, who were cousins of Nadav and Avihu, who were the sons of Aaron, who died when they brought a foreign fire, an alien fire, on the first day of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle. So they became impure through contact with their cousins, Nadav and Avihu, and therefore they couldn't bring the Korban Pesach, the Pesach offering. And some say it was just people who came in contact with some unidentified corpse. Okay. So they complained to Moshe. So what happened? Those men, in verse 7, those men said to him, we are contaminated through a human corpse. Why should we be diminished by not offering Hashem's offering in its appointed time among the children of Israel? So normally, if a person is impure, they would dip in the mikveh, and then by evening, at least, they're pure. They're fine. But if someone comes pure by contact with the dead, with a corpse, which is what we're talking about, it's actually a 7-day period. It's a 7-day purification process that they have to count 7 days. Then on the 3rd day, they get sprinkled with the ashes of the paradum of the red heifer. And the 7th day, I think I could be a little off there. We'll get there in Chukas. We're getting there. Let's see. Yeah, I got it on the 3rd day and the 7th day. And in order to purify themselves, so they said that we won't have time because of when we became impure, we won't have time to be pure for the Korban Pesach. So why should we miss out on this mitzvah? Because we were doing a different mitzvah of taking care of the dead. We should miss out on this mitzvah of Korban Pesach. So in verse 8, Moshe said to them, "Stand and I will hear what Hashem will command you." And on page 781, Hashem spoke to Moshe, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel, saying, if any man will become contaminated through a human corpse on a distant road, whether you or your generations, you shall make the Pesach offering for Hashem in the 2nd month. On the 14th day in the afternoon shall they make it, with matzahs and bitter herbs shall they eat it. They shall not leave over from it until morning, nor shall they break a bone of it, like all the decrees of the Pesach offering, they shall make it." So they bring it on the 14th of Sivan, exactly a month later from when the main Korban Pesach was brought. So they have a makeup day a month later, but this is only somebody who was through no fault of their own unable to, or through an accident, were unable to bring the Korban Pesach offering. But if they didn't do it because of laziness or negligence, so then they don't have this makeup day to bring the Pesach offering. And our sages say that by mitzvahs in general, mitzvahs are commanded in the Torah, that Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, "Speak to the children of Israel the following mitzvah." And this could have very well been commanded in that way, that when we have the mitzvah of the Korban Pesach, we have the mitzvah to bring the Paschal lamb. So it could have said that, and if somebody was unable to bring it because of things beyond their control, so they have this makeup date a month later. But it's not, and our sages say the reason is that these people were so inspired that you find that sometimes people have they have a mitzvah and they have a reason why they have to, why they can't fulfill the mitzvah. Let's say someone's having, don't have a good example. Let's say someone's having surgery and they say, well, I can't make it to Mincha today because I'm having surgery. So they could be happy about it, sad about it. But here we find that they're disturbed that they have this opportunity for a mitzvah and something's preventing them from doing it. It wasn't, yay, I could get out of it. And it wasn't even, oh, well, I could get out of it. It was disturbing to them that they wanted this mitzvah that they couldn't have. And because of that righteousness, so this whole section of the Torah was brought as inspired by them, that they're the impetus for the Torah giving us this mitzvah instead of it just being given in the regular way. Okay, then after this we have the divine signs for the tabernacle moving, and where is it? Okay, I'll read it. 781 verse 15. On the day the tabernacle was set up, the cloud covered the tabernacle that was the tent of the testimony. In the evening there would be upon the tabernacle like a fiery appearance until morning. So it would always be, the cloud would cover it, and an appearance of fire at night. So every morning the fire would leave, and there would be this appearance of a cloud over the tabernacle. And every evening, instead of the cloud, there would be this appearance of fire over the tabernacle. And whenever the cloud was lifted from atop the tent, afterwards the children of Israel would journey, and in the place where the cloud would rest, there the children of Israel would encamp. According to the word of Hashem would the children of Israel journey, and according to the word of Hashem would they encamp. all the days that the cloud would rest upon the tabernacle, they would encamp. So it wasn't they were in the desert for 40 years. They weren't lost in the desert for 40 years. They weren't trying to find their way. It says that according to the word of Hashem, they would journey, and according to the word of Hashem, they would encamp. And they followed these signs that when the cloud picked up and started moving, they would pack everything up and go. And when the cloud stopped, they would encamp there. And it tells us it wasn't an easy time. That it was, in verse 19, when the cloud lingered upon the tabernacle many days, the children of Israel would maintain the charge of Hashem, would not journey. Sometimes the cloud would be upon the tabernacle for a number of days. And sometimes the cloud would remain evening until morning, and the cloud would be lifted in the morning, they would journey, or for a day or a night, or 2 days, a month, a year. So they were never able to get settled and comfortable for all this time they were in the desert, because they never knew it. I know from experience that there are people who, to go on a trip, they plan for months, and they get everything that they need for the trip, and they pack the bags very carefully. And if you would tell them the day before, we're leaving tomorrow, it would disturb them to no end. It would drive them crazy because they don't have that preparation time. And not only preparation to physically get ready, but just to mentally get ready, to put their minds in the right place that, okay, I'm leaving tomorrow. And they didn't have that. They had no idea at any point, am I going to be in this place tomorrow, or am I going to be traveling tomorrow? And they could be, yes, and they could be a year, it could be 2 years, it could be a day. They don't know, like, should I unpack? Should I not unpack? And yes, and it was the Torah. So in the Navi, in Yirmiyahu, Jeremiah, at the beginning, it says that Hashem says, Koamar Hashem, so says Hashem, I remember the kindness of your youth and the love of our Kalula Sayach, the love of when we were first married, when you followed me in the desert in a place that wasn't planted. That this was Hashem saying this is a great merit to the Jewish people for all our history, is that we followed Hashem in spite of not knowing what would be tomorrow, and just relying God will take care of us, and whatever Hashem says, that's what we're going to do. And this was something that stayed with us throughout our history, is that we have that merit. Okay, and we also have the mitzvah that there was a mitzvah to make silver trumpets. 2 silver trumpets, and these silver trumpets would be used to signal when it was time to leave, when it was time to stop, and when they would gather, and when they would go to war. Okay, so in verse 11, page 783, verse 11, it was in the 2nd year, in the 2nd month, on the 20th of the month, the cloud was lifted from upon the tabernacle of testimony. The children of Israel journeyed on their journeys from the wilderness of Sinai. The cloud rested in the wilderness of Paran. And they journeyed for the first time at the bidding of Hashem through Moshe. And it gives the order exactly of how they traveled. And this is the first time that they traveled ever since the Torah was given, that the Torah was given at Sinai, and now they begin traveling from Mount Sinai. Okay, it gives the order of how they traveled with by the banners that we mentioned in Parshas Bamidbar. And then in verse 29 on page 785, Moshe said to Chovev, son of Ru'ul, the Midianite, the father-in-law of Moshe, we are journeying to the place that Hashem has said, I shall give it to you. Go with us, and we shall treat you well, for Hashem has spoken of good for Israel. So he said to him, I shall not go, only to my land, my family, I shall go. So Yisro is telling him that he's going to go back to his family. Moshe said, please do not forsake us, inasmuch as you know that our encampment in the wilderness, you have been as eyes for us. And it shall be that if you come with us, then the goodness with which Hashem will benefit us, he will do good to you. And I think the Ramban says here that what's this goodness that he's promising him is that he's going to have a portion in the land of Israel. Remember, Yisro was not from a tribe, since he wasn't descended from Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, so he wasn't descended from any tribe. He was a convert from the outside. And therefore, he wouldn't have a portion, an ancestral portion in the land of Israel. And Moshe was saying that in fact, he would have an ancestral portion And I say to say that Yisro, with the family of Yisro, was given the land around Yericho, around Jericho. Okay. Where am I? And it's actually a disagreement as to as to if Yisro stayed or if he left. And I think that Chizkuni said that he left and got his family together and remained. Um, so it's and the Ramban says that he stayed. It's a disagreement amongst the commentaries what exactly happened here. Okay, and now the first journey, once again on page 787, verse 33, they journeyed from the mountain of Hashem a 3-day distance, and the Ark of the Covenant of Hashem journeyed before them a 3-day distance to search out for them a resting place. The cloud of Hashem was over them by day when they journeyed from the camp. And now when the ark would journey, Moshe said, "Arise, Hashem, and let your foes be scattered. Let those who hate you flee from before you." And when it rested, they would say, "Reside in tranquility, O Hashem, among the myriad thousands of Israel." And this should be familiar. This is what we say when the Torah is moving. The same way when the ark got up to move, this is what they said. So when the Torah was moving, we say, "Kuma Hashem v'yafutzu oivecha v'yanusu misanecha mipan." So that's exactly, and this pasuk is the source for that tefillah. Okay, so then it continues in chapter 11 on the bottom of 787. The people took to seeking complaints. It was evil in the ears of Hashem, and Hashem heard it, and his wrath flared, and the fire of Hashem burned against them, and it consumed at the edge of the camp. The people cried out to Moshe, and Moshe prayed to Hashem, and the fire died down. He named that place Taveira, for the fire of Hashem had burned against them. So what's this complaining? So Rashi and the Ramban say that when they were by Sinai, they were at least kind of around civilization somewhat. They were in the desert, in the wilderness, away, but not too far. Now they're going into the deep desert. It's like going from offshore to going into the middle of the ocean where there's nothing. Saying there's absolutely no possible source of sustenance, no water, no food. And that's what they were complaining. And if you look in the article translates it, they took to seeking complaints. It's kimis onanim. They were like complainers. And the commentaries say that they started complaining when they didn't even have anything to complain about, that they weren't worried about the present. We're starving. We have no food. We have no water. They're complaining about the future. They're saying later, we're not going to have that. And that's why the fire of Hashem, wrath of Hashem flared against them so harshly, is that they didn't even have anything to complain about against the time, and they were looking for reasons to complain. Okay. Then we have dissatisfaction with the manna. In verse 4 on page 789, the rabble that was among them cultivated a craving, and the children of Israel also wept once more and said, "Who will feed us meat? We remembered the fish that we ate in Egypt free of charge, the cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic. But now our life is parched. There is nothing. We have nothing to anticipate but the manna." And Rashi says, we find they did have meat. I mean, they did have animals. They shouldn't have had too much of a shortage of meat because it says they had many, many animals, that they took the spoils of the land of Egypt and they had animals in Egypt. And it says when they arrived in the land of Israel, they had remember the Reuven and Gad, they had lots of flocks. So they had animals, they have sheep, they had goats, they had lots of animals. But it wasn't something that they would have, they could have regularly, because then it would be used up because they couldn't really farm and properly. But and it might be that, like the richer people had a lot, the people who didn't, there were people who had less. But they did have animals. That's why they said, "Who will feed us meat?" Meaning that we can't have meat regularly. But then they said, "We remember the fish that we ate in Egypt," because they have no fish now. They're in the middle of the desert. There's no fish. That's something like it's a distant memory. The fish that they had in Egypt had the Nile running through it. It was sustained by the Nile, so there was lots of fish in Egypt. And the commentaries say that fish was so plentiful because the Nile was running through. That's what they fed the slaves. They fed the slaves like the like small fish that were worthless. It was like they got the herring or whatever. Okay. But now our life is parched. There is nothing. We have nothing to anticipate but the manna. And it says now the manna was like a coriander seed. Its color was like bedolah, etc. In verse 10, Moshe heard the people weeping in their family groups, each one at the entrance of his tent, and the wrath of Hashem flared greatly, and in the eyes of Moshe was bad. So Moshe said to Hashem, why have you done evil to your servant? Why have I not found favor in your eyes that you placed the burden of this entire people upon me? Did I conceive this entire people? Did I give birth to it? That you say to me, carry them in your bosom, as a nurse carries a suckling to the land that you swore to its forefathers? Where shall I get meat to give to this entire people when they weep to me, saying, give it us meat that we may eat? And I think I saw some of the commentaries. I think the Kli Yakar says that the mashal that he gives the metaphor that he gives is very specific, that I give birth to it, that you say to me, carry them in your bosom as a nurse carries a suckling, meaning that it's a man saying, did I give birth that I could nurse them? Meaning they're all coming to me, begging me for meat, for fish. He's saying like, it's like, let's say a single father with a baby, like, could he nurse the baby? He has no way to give the baby nutrients. Where shall I, what's that? Yes. Where shall I get meat to give to this entire people when they weep to me, saying, give us meat that we may eat? I alone cannot carry this entire nation, for it is too heavy for me. And if this is how you deal with me, then kill me now, for I found favor. For if I have found favor in your eyes, let me not see my evil. And Hashem said to Moshe in verse 16, gather to me 70 men from the elders of Israel, whom you know to be elders of the people and its officers. Take them to the tent of meeting and have them stand with you, there with you. I'll descend and speak with you, and I will increase some of the spirit that is upon you, place it upon them, and they shall bear the burden of the people with you, and you shall not bear alone. So the commentaries ask, how does that help? The complaint was that he has no way to get meat for the people. The people are complaining the people are fetching, they're complaining, and he has no way to fulfill their complaints. So what does it help to have 70 other people along with you to bear the complaints with you? How does that help? So some of the commentators say, I think the Ramban hints that it's that these Moshe, as an individual, might have been someone who was far away from the people. Meaning like he was someone so far removed from the average person that like he was a very easy target to complain against. He's like that person that they've never seen or rarely see all the way out there, this tremendous holy person, and he's a very easy target. Whereas if they have 70 elders, that would involve people from the tribes. It might be people that they know, people that they grew up around, and it's someone that they could talk to, it's someone that could, influence them in a positive way, in a more personal way, I should say. Someone that's among them, one of their, not quite their peers, because these are tremendous holy men, but someone that they could relate to a little bit more. I saw, though, I think it's Reb Shimon Schwab explains this whole idea and what's coming up next, but I'll start it now, is that what was going on here is that he says that a leader inspires really from within themselves. And what they said that a leader brings a hashpah, they bring blessing from Hashem to the people. A leader of the people is the one who brings the Hashem's blessing to the people, and but they bring based on their own personality. And Moshe, being someone who is completely spiritual, whose physical side was like completely gone, says when he came down from Mount Sinai, his face shone with a spiritual light. It's almost like there was no physical body there. We'll see later in the parsha that he was separated from his wife, that because he had to be constantly available for to speak with Hashem, could never be physically impure, spiritually impure, I should say. He was someone who was completely spiritual, with like the physical side of him completely gone. And such a person, the leadership and with a blessing that he brought to the people was also purely spiritual. And that's what he was saying, like, could I bring the people meat? Or he's saying meat and fish and these, foods was something completely removed from him. And what he brought to the people was man, which I say to say was the perfect food that like gave us energy and kept us alive and kept us healthy. And there was no waste. There was nothing eliminated because it was perfect food. It was like spiritual food that gave us the energy and gave us the, our health, but nothing else. And that's what Moshe was able to bring to the people. A purely spiritual person brought them purely spiritual food. But Moshe says like these physical things like the meat, and that's something he couldn't relate to and couldn't bring them. And that's why the answer was bring in these 70 men, the Canaan, the elders from the elders of Israel, that they would be the ones to people who are less physically removed than Moshe, great men nonetheless, but less physically removed than Moshe, who could relate to the people more and their physical needs more, and perhaps bring about this blessing and of a more physical nature. Okay. And in verse 18 on page 791, to the people you shall say, prepare yourselves for tomorrow, and you shall eat meat, for you have wept in the ears of Hashem, saying, who will feed us meat, for it was better for us in Egypt. So Hashem will give you meat, and you will eat. Not for 1 day shall you eat, nor for 2 days, nor for 5 days, nor 10 days, nor 20 days, until an entire month of days, until it comes out of your nose and becomes nauseating to you, because you have rejected Hashem who is in your midst, and you have wept before him, saying, why did we leave Egypt? You're saying Hashem was telling them that this will kill their desire. You feel that and it's almost, if the English, the Hebrew actually, for when they desired, it's they desired desire, meaning that they like awoke a desire within themselves that they didn't have. And Hashem was teaching them that this desire is all imagination. It's all imagination. There's nothing real to it. That you feel this desire, like you need this meat, you need this taste of meat, and you can't live without it. In a month's time, you're going to have it every single day. It's going to be coming out of your nose till you're nauseous by the thought of meat. What's happened? It's the same meat. It's the same exact meat. How could the same meat be something you can't live without, and then you're nauseous by a month later? It's because the desire is something that's just, it's not tangible. It's not something tangible. It's not something real. It's all in the imagination. It's all it's all fake. It's something that's in our heads but isn't real. So when it's in our heads, when we have this imagination, it's like a dream. When you have this dream, it's real. But if you think that you think that you need it. If you think you don't need it, you think it's disgusting. But it's the same exact thing. And it's the desire that's all imaginative. Okay. So on page 793, there's a very perplexing question here. Moshe said, 600,000 foot soldiers are the people in whose midst I am. There's 600,000 men of military age. That's besides all the women and children and older men. Yet you say, I shall give them meat, and they shall eat a meat for a month. Can sheep or cattle be slaughtered for them and suffice for them? Or if all the fish of the sea will be gathered for them, would it suffice for them? So Hashem said to Moshe, is the hand of Hashem limited? Now you will see whether my word come to pass or not. So the commentary says, what's Moshe asking? Does he not, he thinks God can't supply meat? He's asking, where are you going to find all this meat? God can't find all this meat? God can't just create meat out of nothing like animals were originally created? What's Moshe's question? So the commentaries all seem to go with an approach that his understanding was this wouldn't be miraculous. It would be derech hateva, it would be a natural occurrence. And some say, I think the Or HaChaim says that Hashem said this was going to be a punishment, that it would be coming out of their noses, they would be disgusted by it, it would destroy the desire from within them. And he thought that Moshe understood that something that's a punishment isn't created miraculously. That the punishment for the Jewish people wouldn't be created miraculously. That was Moshe's understanding. But I think based on Rav Shimon Schwab, I'm not sure if Rav Shimon Schwab says it or I saw this elsewhere, is that this was all the same theme as what we spoke out earlier, is that Moshe, as a purely spiritual person, someone whose physical side was completely gone. And so he, in his mind, we said that he couldn't bring, physical pleasure to he couldn't bring the meat to the people, something physical, is that he, in his mind, that's not something that Hashem would bring as miraculous. Meaning that Hashem would bring a spiritual pleasure as miraculous, but would Hashem fulfill a person's physical desires in a miraculous way? That was a foreign concept to Moshe. Is that these physical desires were something that's, to be frowned upon, not to be like miraculously filled. And that's why he thought it would have to be coming in a natural way. And he's saying, like, where's this going to come from? And that's why Hashem says, is my hand insufficient? That Hashem could supply us with our spiritual needs, our physical needs, and everything in between, even in a miraculous fashion. Okay. So it says that Moshe, in verse 24, Moshe left and spoke the words of Hashem to the people, and he gathered 70 men from among the elders of the people, and them stand around the tent. And Hashem descended in a cloud and spoke to him, and he increased some of the spirit that was upon him and gave it to the 70 men, the elders. When the spirit rested upon them, they prophesied, but did not do so again. But 2 men who remained behind in the camp, the name of one was Elder, the name of the second was Medad, and the spirit rested upon them. They had been among the recorded ones, but they had not gone out to the tent, then they had prophesied in the camp. So who are these 2 people? What does it mean they had been among the recorded ones? What does that mean? So our sages say is that Moshe was told to get 70 elders, and so he did. But there are 12 tribes of Israel. And if you have 70 elders, that means assuming that they'd be evenly distributed amongst the tribes, which is what the tribes would want. So you have about 6. If you take 6 men from or 6 people from each tribe, each of the 12 tribes, you end up with 72. So you end up with 2 extra. That means that there are going to be 2 tribes that have 1 less leaders in the council of elders. So which tribe would agree to that? That they'll be less represented than the other tribes. So Moshe did, so they did a lot. They did it by lottery. And that is, they had 72, they picked out actually 72 people that they felt were worthy of being from this council of elders, 6 from each tribe. And they each picked a name, or they picked a paper from a hat. On 70 of them were written Zaken, elder, and on 2 of them were blank. And the ones who had the blank ones were not picked for this, were to not go to this group. And Eldad and Medad were 2 of the 72, but they didn't feel themselves worthy. They were too humble, and therefore they didn't even go to the gathering. So there were only 70 who showed up. So Eldad and Medad were worthy of being amongst the 70 elders, but they weren't actually part of the convocation. But they still got their prophecy and prophesied in the camp. And the youth, meaning Yeshua, ran and told Moshe, and he said, Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp, prophesying in the camp. And 1 second. I'm sorry, I'm not Yeshua. Yeshua's the next one. Some say that youth was Gershom, who was Moshe's son. And in verse 28, Yeshua, son of Nun, servant of Moshe, since his youth, spoke up and said, my Lord Moshe, incinerate them, or incarcerate them, I'm sorry. Can actually be understood in both ways. The Hebrew kalaim would be like destroy them. But he said, incarcerate them. And why would he say incarcerate them? So our sages say that with the prophecy they were saying is that Moshe is going to die, and Yeshua is going to is going to lead the Jewish people into the land of Israel, and that disturbed Yeshua, which he did. It was a prophecy. It was going to come true, but that disturbed Yeshua that they would be saying that about Moshe. And Moshe said to him, are you being zealous for my sake? Would that the entire people of Hashem could be prophets if Hashem would place his spirit upon them. Okay, so now let's see the fulfillment of this whole thing. So what happens here? So in verse 30, Moshe was brought into the camp, he and the elders of Israel. A wind went forth from Hashem and blew quail from the sea and spread them over the camp, a day's journey this way and a day's journey that way, all around the camp, 2 cubits above the face of the earth. So the wind brought all these quail into the camp. And in page 795, verse 32, the people rose up all that day and the night, and then all the next day gathered up all the quail. The one with the least gathered in 10 chomers, and they spread them out around the camp. The meat was still between their teeth, not yet chewed. They just put them into their mouth. When the wrath of Hashem flared against the people, and Hashem struck a very mighty blow against the people. He named that place Kivros HaTaiva, means the burial of the physical desire, because there they buried the people who had been craving. From Kivros HaTaiva, the people journeyed to Chatzeres, they remained in Chatzeres. So the Ramban says that it wasn't everybody who ate the meat died. It seems that they were commanded to eat the meat for 30 days. But it was the people who aroused the general populace to cry about not having meat, that they were instigators. And it was the instigators who were struck down at that time. And the people in general ate the meat until they were disgusted by it. Yes? So this brings up an interesting point, and that is this shows us that quail is in fact a kosher bird. And my wife has a friend in Israel who actually has quail in her backyard. She, has for her kids to take care of. But they eat quail. Seems to be a food bird, but also they lay eggs, and the eggs are supposed to be very healthy. Right. The quail eggs are supposed to be very healthy. But um, the kashrus organizations say that you have to be careful with quail because there's not every bird that's called quail is necessarily quail. And there's actually a species of quail called, I have it down here, Coturnix, I think. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but it's called Coturnix. That's the traditional, according to our tradition, that's the quail that was actually eaten in the desert, was the Coturnix quail. That quail is kosher, and the Paiskim, the halachic authorities say that you could eat that quail if it's shechted properly, and you could eat the eggs of that quail. But there are other species of quail in America. One is a bobwhite quail, and that's actually a bird native to America that the settlers called quail because it reminded them of quail, but it's not actually quail. And it's not even related to quail. And that bird is not kosher. We don't have a tradition of kashrus. So if someone's, let's say, buying quail eggs, that the bobwhite quail is not kosher. So we have to make sure that's Coturnix quail, and which is not hard because Coturnix quail is spotted and bobwhite quail is not spotted. The problem is that there's a third kind of quail called button quail. And button quail, I believe, I'm not 100% sure. It seems that at least some kashrus organizations say we don't have a tradition that's kosher, and therefore we have to be careful to make sure that if we get quail eggs, that they are Coturnix, not button quail. You might need a hechsher on the eggs to make sure of that. Okay. So that's what that gives the time of the people journeyed to Chatzeris and remained at Chatzeris. And then the parsha ends with Miriam and Aaron speaking against Moshe regarding the Cushite women he had married, for he had married a Cushite woman. And the commentaries say that what happened is that Miriam had heard Zipporah, Moshe's wife, had heard Eldad and Medad prophesizing in the camp, and Zipporah said, "Oh no, their wives! Woe to their wives, because they're going to have to separate from their husbands, like my husband did." And that's the first that Miriam had heard about it, and she spoke about this with Aaron and criticized Moshe for separating from his wife. And then in verse 4, Hashem said suddenly to Moshe and to Aaron, to Miriam, "You three go out to the tent of meeting." And our sages say that he said suddenly because the reason why Moshe could not be married it was because he was always had to be available for prophecy, because prophecy could come from Hashem whenever he never knew, and we had to be spiritually, ritually pure for that to happen. So Hashem appeared suddenly to Aaron and Miriam as well, and our sages say that they were actually ritually impure at that moment, and therefore they had to they were running around looking for water, asking people, "Do you have water? Do you have water?" to purify themselves. And that was a demonstration to them as to why Moshe was different and that he couldn't remain married to his wife. And so they had a prophecy. Hashem said, "Hear now my words. If there be prophets among you in a vision, shall I, Hashem, make myself known to him in a dream? I shall speak to them. They have visions. They have unclear hints as to what's supposed to be understood, and they had to interpret it, as we see in the Haftarah, actually. In verse 7, not so is my servant Moshe, and my entire house is a trusted one. Mouth to mouth do I speak to him in a clear vision and not in riddles. At the image of Hashem does he gaze. Why did you not fear to speak against my servant Moshe?" He says Moshe is in a completely different category than any prophet. He's the most humble. And Miriam was struck with tzaraas. She was struck with the spiritual leprosy. And Moshe cried to Hashem to heal her. And Miriam was quarantined for 7 days, and then it went away, and she was brought back, and then they journeyed on. Okay, shkoyach, everybody have a great Shabbos. Shkoyach.